I feel like surfers nowadays have got about as much in common as people that drive cars. It doesn't mean anything to be a surfer. And yet there's still this concept of this surfer's identity in a culture that we all share, which I just don't believe is really there.
Welcome to the Water People podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept and interesting water people on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. For us, this is a place to exchange not just ideas and practices, but stories, experiential knowledge gleaned from the aquatic adventures that shape us. We acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. Let's raise a glass to something bigger than just great beer. Meet Stone & Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small. Today, we're getting tangential. This episode is part of a 3-episode slip slide behind the scenes of a project that Dave's been working on for the better part of this year, the Electric Acid Surfboard Test. It's a series by Stab that explores, quote, alternative surfboard design. Basically, it offers iconic surfers on left field experimental surfcraft. And our very own aquatic wombat, renowned question repeater, one David Rastovich, is this year's test pilot, whom they have dubbed, quote, surfing's reluctant messiah. He agreed to do it with a catch. All the boards had to be wrapped in flax cloth instead of fiberglass, something he's been doing for quite a few years now with Gary McNeill. The Stab crew had 11 boards anonymously shaped for Dave, and over the course of the 4-part series, he rides them each repeatedly over the course of about 8 months, and then he picks a winner, sharing obscure wisdom from 3 decades of experimental surf adventures and many good one-liners along the way. The series dropped to many rave reviews. People really seem to like it, partly because Dave glows with enthusiasm when it comes to board nerdery, something that if you listen to Water People, you would know very well. But a huge part of the success of the project is its mastermind, Danny Johnson, whose skillful storytelling and brilliant editing, his hilarious musical moments make it fun to watch even if you aren't that into surfboards. So today we're in conversation with Danny. He's head of films at Stab and has been writing, producing, and directing for years with the best sense of humor in the surf space. We've also recorded episodes with 2 other influential characters in the series, Flax Master Gary McNeill, to get into the nitty-gritty of experimental materials, and Otto Flores, who was the fixer and wave deliverer behind the series' final episode in Puerto Rico. Dave mostly signed on to work on the project because of Danny, so we wanted to sit down and have a proper chat to get a glimpse inside the mind of one of our favorite creatives, Danny Johnson. You can watch the whole series over at stabmag.com. We always begin by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Will you share a story like that from your life with us?
Sure. I feel like questions like that are super broad. They're hard to really pinpoint. So you want something that good start to the podcast, reveals a lot of character. But to be honest, the only things that come to mind for me are family things. There's no other like pivotal moments that sent me in various directions that come to mind to choose from. It's only like the really big things like family, and specific moments being like death and birth, you know? So like losing a brother to suicide and then also having kids. Like they're the only ones, you know? Mm-hmm. And death's maybe a little bit too morbid to start with. And then kids is the most insufferably boring thing to hear people talk about, you know, because everyone loves their kids.
Unless you have kids.
Well, no, yeah.
And then you love hearing people talk about kids.
Yeah, but it's just it's just so common and cliche. But they're truly the only things that I feel like stand out as like moments of forever pivotal change.
Is there any lasting ripples that came from your brother taking his life that you can reflect on? Yeah,
I think that one's just like a huge paradigm shifter. But one of the big takeaways, I think, for me was having no clue that he was battling in that way. And so you think you know what's going on and we can read people and we can make sense of a situation, but I just misinterpreted his behaviour his entire life. And there was not a single warning sign, as much as in retrospect, once he was gone, we were like, oh my God, and suddenly things made sense. But he hid it so well. But while he was alive, like I would misinterpret his behaviour all the time. And so I think that
Can you tell us, like, this is a helpful conversation
Yeah.
for a lot of people to hear the specifics of. So what does that mean? How are you misinterpreting?
I think he would withdraw or he would, in his hiding his like battles or whatever, he would withdraw or say things or behave in a way that was, even sometimes it was be like, oh, he's being an asshole, or other times being like, oh, he just doesn't want to be around us right now. He's isolating himself because he's busy doing this, or there's just a plethora of things about the way he went on that I was constantly misunderstanding. And it was way before the modern wave of mental health. It was 15 years ago or so. And I feel like since then we've come a long way in kind of understanding. And so I think when people are battling, they're quite often hard to be around. Everyone's always like, speak up when you're struggling, which is, I think, for people that are struggling, or when you're struggling, it can be quite hard to do. But I think on the flip side of that, it's more important to sort of suffer through people when they're hard to be around, because that's typically when they need help. And that was kind of, I think the bigger picture would be knowing how to see through the exterior behavior and not thinking you know what's going on for someone, and then as well trying to, tolerate people when they're pushing you away, like realize that can be a thing you need to be counterintuitive around, you know what I mean? Because it's like when you're sick, like animals that are sick in the wild, apparently a lot of other animals won't want to be around them. And I think when you're unwell mentally or you're struggling in that way, I think you can repel people in the same way. And then when you're isolated, it's hard to get anywhere.
It's a really fine line at what you're saying, because, that line of knowing when to lean in and push a bit on your friends or family when they're having those sort of retracting, reclusive times. I find it hard sometimes to know when to like really front up to that person and like acknowledge that they're in the trenches in that moment and they're having a hard time, and making them potentially feel worse because they're seeing that their suffering is making others suffer or struggle as well. Or even just that thing of, once you acknowledge it, it's like, it's really true. Like if you have a good friend say to you, hey, you're really struggling right now, and that's kind of a moment like a diagnosis. It's like, if you keep ignoring it, hopefully it'll just go away. Or life situations will change soon and you'll come out of this slump and you'll be okay. But when you have a friend say it to you and vocalize it and reflect it back, that you're obviously really under a load right now, that really makes it real. And that's, I don't know, that can be a hard position to be in as a friend, to come to your friend and say that, because you're kind of making it really clear that they're struggling.
Yeah, they might not be ready.
Yeah.
And quite often there's a natural cycle that is healthy and fine for people. You're so right, though. It's an impossible jigsaw puzzle to put together.
Yeah, really tricky. Sorry that happens. It's a hard thing because you can't have those conversations anymore with that person. I've had that in my life too with my dad, and so you just got to feel your own way through it, eh?
Yeah, that's the toughest thing, I think, is the finality of it. And it's tragic when anyone dies before natural causes, but when they choose to take their own life, it's like the complication and just the awareness of their suffering, and then the inability to do anything yeah. But it's also really common. Like, it's so funny how often, and this is maybe people aren't enjoying the start of a podcast that talks about death and suicide, but
it's not the first time.
Isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's so like quite often people are like, oh my God, and people feel really uncomfortable and don't want to talk about it, don't know how to, but then you're like, oh, do you know anyone that's committed suicide? And they're like, oh yeah, like 4 people.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, it's pretty common. Like it's not this
especially amongst men in Australia.
Yeah, big time.
Statistics are really high.
They're really high. And also we've had a conversation with Zenith, who's a death walker. So she's
I've heard about this
area.
lady.
Amazing woman. I don't think she's doing that anymore. She sort of stepped out of it. But anyway, with our conversation with her, she was really pausing on the word suicide and saying, don't use that word, because that's like the word used to make that act a crime. So when you commit suicide, that's like a crime. Not that it matters because the person who did it is not here anymore, but we've thought of it in that way, using that language as this crime that you commit, and there's all this baggage around it. And she says, just switch that out for taking their own life. They took their life. And so it's a bit of a change in just how we can perceive them doing that and seeing it in less of an institutionalized way by saying it's this crime they committed or this terrible thing they committed, and more like, well, and in my case with my dad, it was that his suffering was so large that it was a release of his spirit to get out of his body that was giving him so much pain, and his life that was such a struggle. So I look at it and I'm like, no, there's no crime committed there at all. His body was so shot and he needed to just get out of here.
Did he talk about it ahead of time? Like, did you think that was a possibility?
He was a pretty unstable guy, so it was always a potential.
Yeah.
I felt like our family wasn't that surprised when it happened, and that was sort of the indicator that we're like, oh yeah, maybe we did feel that, you know, he was capable of that because his waveform, the way of his being was so high and so low. He would hit the highest highs and be the funniest guy you've ever met in your life and just so high, and then he would just go super low and he would be reclusive, and it was the same old thing. He would just retract, be the guy on the hill on his own, you know, no community around him to come and go, hey, you're struggling, can we help you out? He would just withdraw, not want to be a burden on anyone. And then that's when he did that. So, and that's like textbook scenario for so many of us. And I don't know how you go, but when I have like troubling times caught in my mind, it's often that's my first knee-jerk reaction, Hayla, is to like retreat and go silent and be quiet. And I want to try and sort out what's going on in my head on my own. I don't want to be a burden.
It's such a tricky part of any relationship is learning when to push back and when to leave things alone, you know, even if the waveform is less extreme.
Yeah,
still
it's really
like
hard.
Learning how to love someone and when to step in and shake them out of their bullshit or
like what do you do? Because you strike me as someone who has like a good waveform that comes up and down, and you have like this incredibly creative streak. How do you go when you hit, like right now you've got a big project you're working really hard on, you're probably going to have a crash at the end of it because you're tired, but also you're kind of enjoying the highness and of it. How do you go with that?
Well, I do it both. The recluse definitely need to spend that solo time to deal with the crashes, but I'm also like pretty energized by people. I think I'm on the other end of the extrovert end, and so like I like being around people, but in the darker times, like definitely find myself like hiding off in a cave for sure.
I come back to that conversation with Zenith a lot, and the main part of what I think about is this practice she offered to us, and she said that every parent she feels should sit with a cup of tea every day and ponder the death of their child or children.
Oh man, I do that involuntary. That was like one of the first things about having kids. I started my awareness over the fragility of life, and I always just have these not intrusive thoughts, but like just worst case scenario imaginations of losing your children. Like it's, I've never really thought of that as a great thing, but now I do. Thanks, Zenith.
Well, she was like, you know, you don't want to have the consideration of this being a possibility for the first time when it happens.
And it also,
if it happens,
it also makes you appreciate them being alive in a way that you can become complacent with life in general. But so when in the East, they quite often meditate around death. And I feel like we just always like squash it down and pretend it's not happening and are obsessed with youth. But like, being awareness of death just makes you enjoy life so much more.
Well, you mentioned the word East, so let's take that as a segue. He's leaving us already. He's done.
Nice. Okay, now we've done the useful part. Let's just talk bullshit for the next 40 minutes.
Let's escape into a land of inconsequential surfing. That's so nice. So we get to disappear into a superfluous, lovely land of sliding on waves. Danny, you have been behind this series, the electric acid surfboard test. The word on the street is that your creative prowess, your sense of humor has been a huge part of the resurgence of Stab's online presence to a different sort of audience. And I wanted to ask you about how you came to do the work that you do, creating through different mediums. What do you say when people ask you what you do?
That actually happens a lot. People, what do you do? And I find it difficult to answer. I typically just say I work at a surf magazine, even though magazines don't exist like they used to, and just hope there's no follow-up question. I don't really have a good answer for that, because Stab's a small operation and we all do a lot of things. So I don't know, what should I say?
I cringe at that question too. And I
Yeah.
have to credit my friend Matt Barr has a podcast called Looking Sideways out of Europe. And he has this great series where he asks creatives these questions. I'm borrowing his questions right now. So it's a series that he runs. And that question just freaks me out. What do you do?
What do you say?
I just sort of mumble about like riding and surfing and stuff. And then people are like, oh, so you're a surf coach? And I'm like, I don't know.
You say writer.
Yeah,
I think
writer.
the most powerful response you give is usually, writer.
What do you say, Dave?
What do you think I say?
I don't know. I'd love to know.
Oh, God.
I'm a surfer.
Yeah, well, what do you write on your customs declaration of
question.
the occupation?
Oh, yeah.
Get
Well,
off the plane.
I think I studied graphic design a million years ago, so I just have written that every time.
Yeah.
Graphic designer?
And I don't do any graphic design ever. But it's just what I've always written, and I don't. Why do they even ask that? Like, what I don't even get the purpose of that.
Yeah,
so.
I make bombs, like bomb maker. Like, is anyone going to write them?
We got it. Yeah, I'm always blown away. Why do they want to know the occupation? No one's ever reading that.
No.
What use
No one
is that?
looks
in
at
the
What
this.
fool is going to say something that might drag them into the back room to get?
Yeah. What do you
investigated?
write?
Surfer.
Oh, you do write stuff?
Yeah, because I don't want to be looking sweaty and nervous by writing something else that doesn't feel as true. Because I have this vision in my mind that when we walk through airports, they're like heat sensors and stuff that can tell how much you're sweating and your heart rate. And see, I used to get pulled into a back room in America for like 10 years after we did the Cove documentary.
Oh,
Every
because you had a
time
little check mark
had
next
a
to your
little,
name.
environmental
right.
terrorist was
Environmental
person of
terrorist.
interest. So when George Bush was running that shit show, he made that happen because a couple activists, animal rights activists, had blown up animal testing labs in America at the time as a way to stop that cruelty, right? And so anyone who was in that realm of activism that was like intervening or doing something more forthright rather than just picketing in front of the White House was deemed like an eco-terrorist. So I was put on that list.
You could write that, eco-terrorist, on your...
Yeah, that's exactly what I should have written. Maybe I did. And
That
that's
would
why
have
I
the least
started it all.
sweat. the
Yeah,
machines.
just being honest.
It's like,
Leave me
well,
alone.
look, we'll just let him in. He's so honest.
Yeah.
Doesn't George Bush seem like such a lovely grandfatherly figure in retrospect?
I've heard so many people say that.
A great
Just
artist.
Like someone who's seen...
Down homey guy. Yeah, painter.
who is not exactly the most articulate fellow, but you look back now and you're like, he was a genius.
Yeah. He
was
Like,
not
comparatively.
Yeah. Great author and
an
speaker.
orator.
Yeah.
Holy shit, the bar has slid way down.
Wow.
Yeah, okay, well that's interesting. So
Danny.
yeah, we never answered that question.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
but,
Well, I'm taking suggestions if you... I might just write eco-terrorist just because that sounds so...
What does Layla tell people, your partner Layla? What does she tell people you do?
It's funny. I had one the other day where Layla had been chatting to someone, one of our neighbours, and then they said, "Oh, but so you're in IT, right?" And I was like, "Oh, well, Layla doesn't know what I do either." Like, I don't know how she somehow I think she said I work on a computer or something.
Yep.
I don't know. She doesn't know. She's always actually when you just ask that, the person that comes in my mind is Layla because she's always laughing at me when I try and say what I do.
Yeah.
She thinks it's hilarious.
And this is a common situation for creative people who work across multiple mediums in a world where the boundaries around work and life are so loose on that one. When did you first start making cash for what you do now? When did it become a job?
So what I do now specifically in terms of at Stab surf video stuff, it had probably just started happening when I was at magazines. Like I started working at Waves magazine a long time ago and the digital revolution had already well kicked in, but the advertisers hadn't, I don't know. It was just like a habit maybe of spending money in magazines, even though they were in that current form. Like what Sean is doing with Surfing World now is really special. The way he's been able to make that independent and do what he's doing. But the big publishing house owning magazines and just spitting them out was well dead, but you could still earn money and get a job. But then we were also trying to appeal to the digital space, so there was more and more need for video things. And I'd studied video, like film at university, and so I was naturally just jumping on and doing more and more video stuff from there.
You worked at Surfing World before Stab, and before that?
Yeah, so it was Waves and then
yeah.
I went to Surfing World, and it was the same thing there. Like we're still making a magazine, but the video, more specifically, stuff was kind of more fun because I don't know. I like magazines, but like the video stuff I was just naturally became more and more opportunities for that. So
Was that in the Blakey era? When
yeah.
he was running that?
Yeah, I was friends with Blakey and he called me up and offered me a job and I jumped at it because I just love what he does and what he makes. So yeah, we had a lot of fun together. at that time.
Yeah, was the week wrap your idea to start? Was that one of those things when you were doing the weekly wrap or the week wrap?
So that was I was working there, and we had our boss at the time. He was this like notorious. You guys know Doug. So Doug just like he's like, I need you to make videos. Your budget is $0. And I'm like, well, I knew that there was this guy doing it in the skate world who did a similar thing that I directly copied, where he would just take all the clips that were out there. And you can actually use that for free because it's fair use. It falls under like 3 different means of fair use, whether it's news or satire or whatever. So I was like, well, that's kind of the only thing you can do. And I always thought someone should do it in surfing. And then, I started doing that. Yeah. And that I guess that was like a pretty grueling thing because it was like every Wednesday I had to put one of those videos out, but it was like I had to find everything that had happened and then like figure out what I was going to say, set up this like makeshift studio in my house with a green screen and stuff, film it and then edit it and have it all out in one day. So that was like a pretty like grueling learning.
And were you doing all the combing of clips yourself?
Yeah, the whole thing, yeah.
You have a bit of a track record of this. I heard that you were offered assistance to help with the East project that you're currently finishing the final episode for right now, and you denied having anyone help you. Is that true?
Well, it's not as simple. I mean, they're not assistants. Like, we've got a lot of talented editors at Stab, and I would have loved to have had people working with me, but they're not in Byron. They're all around the place. And the idea of sending them footage and then they edit something and then I upload it and watch it and then we leave notes and then have a meeting, like that process is so, I've done that so many times and it's so just grueling. I'd rather just do it myself.
Yeah.
And so, it wasn't a wise choice necessarily, but the other thing is I really like connecting dots and having little bits flow together, the segues between sections and finding those threads. And when you're editing in isolation, particularly in 2 different locations, like there might be a quote from an interview that is like editing's just chopping stuff down. So you're always trying to like refine things. And so you might just chop that quote off without a second thought. But that quote, once it's married up with something someone else says and then someone else says, can actually be a thread in a direction you follow. And so it's not like we're working to a script. It's reality TV where we just throw you in a situation and you've got to respond. So all the crafting all happens in the editing. So does that justify my stupid decision?
Yeah, totally. I totally understand. How many hours are we talking about?
Oh, in terms of making this thing?
In front of the computer.
Well, too many
Yeah.
but it's so hard to quantify. Like the first episode was months of like kind of pulling everything together and then trying to figure it out, but also working on other things and still planning and Dave was still zipping around and we were still shooting interviews and things like that. So it's hard to really figure out for that first episode. And sourcing archive material, that takes a long time.
Yeah.
Even just one photo sometimes. It's not even editing, it's that can really, but getting the right photo or the right moment, it adds so much versus something that kind of fits.
Film is a black hole of time and energy and money. It's unbelievable how much time goes into it.
Yeah, and well, so after the first episode, I hadn't started the second, third, or fourth, and so it was like this 2-week turnaround. All I'd done is like I hadn't been through the footage. I just kind of like put it in folders or whatever, and so that's been particularly grueling. Not just the editing, like the writing, the sourcing materials, the recording voiceover, like all those extra little bits that just add chunks of time.
Yeah.
Dave, you're pretty particular about projects that you work on. You don't do a lot of things in front of the camera these days. And I know because most of the people come to me as your personal secretary to ask if they can be in touch with you.
If anyone's listening who wants to reach out, please don't do that.
The irony
Gets me in a lot
of the
trouble.
feminist activist.
But did you see that last one where I was like, exclude Lauren from this, please? I am responding.
The question is, what made you want to work on this project in particular? For those who are familiar with the series, you'll know that alternative materials are involved, flax. But I feel like Danny being at the helm had a lot to do with you signing on.
Yeah, 100%. It was all because of Danny.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it really was, though, because of the ability to have conversations like this all the time. And it's like just the relationships sometimes are enough for a thing to just be like, yeah, let's just do it. Like, when you got a shitty job to do, like on your house, and you might offer some friends to come over and you do it together. Oh, yeah. You have a blast.
Yeah.
So then if you got a great job to do and you do it with someone you like spending time with, then it's like extra awesome. So I think it was that the opportunity to also have a laugh and to not be sort of railroaded or pigeonholed like a lot of projects I've been sort of pulled into over the years have had an earnestness and a really distinct goal of a purpose behind them, which is great. Though, as you all know, like I like to give a shit about things, but not take it so seriously that you're like, you know, begrudgingly doing the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And so that was also part of this, where it was like, hey, I think we could actually have a lot of fun while saying something useful and doing something hopefully useful. It's that same old thing we're always saying, meaningful play. And it just felt like that's possible with Danny.
Danny, there would have been a lot of surfers who would love to work on a project like this through an outlet like Stab. Is there a long running list, or how each season, this is the what?
This is the
Seventh
edition, yeah.
Yeah. So is there a running list and then you just like feel out the cultural vibe at the time, or is it totally random, or did you just pick Dave and then try to go after him?
Well, Dave's always been the unicorn, but no one thought you would do it, I guess. And so it's not like there was a list and we were like, oh, should it be Dave or this person or that person? But I mean, if you didn't say yes, then it would have been someone else. But there's always names. It's constantly thrown around, like names for who will do Stab in the Dark, feature in the projects in general, because it's really tricky to find someone who not only surfs well, but has a point of view and can communicate that point of view.
Because they're very different skill sets, aren't they?
And they're so rare.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember listening to Ira Glass talk once about how they try and find stories, and it's always their first question. It doesn't matter how amazing the story is in terms of having all the touch points, the arc, the twists, the turns. Their first question always, and especially their medium's radio voice podcast as well, is there a talker? Because if there's not a character to tell that story, like good stories happen to people that can tell them. It doesn't matter how it happens to you. If you can't tell it in an interesting way, then yeah. So that's the constant problem we're up against with surfing, because you need to in the surf world, because there's not that many surfers. There's not that many people whose surfing can warrants that amount of filming in a project. And then on top of that, to have the ability to spin a little yarn and make it entertaining is so rare. So it's just the constant battle of trying to find ways to make different people fit in different ways that work.
You're a really talented storyteller, and I wonder why you stick to the genre of surfing in particular. Certainly not probably the most high-paying field of creative production. So what is it for you? What keeps you in our little niche?
I don't know. I think, thank you, by the way. I don't necessarily co-sign that I'm all that great, but
we think you're great.
Oh,
Actually,
you.
I'd love to read a review.
Oh, yeah, let's watch Danny turn as red as that cable right there.
I looked at the comments on some of the episodes on the Stab website. I don't do that often, but I wanted to for this episode. Wonderful episode, wrote Surfer. Ross is a genius. Donald is an artist, and Danny is the best glue on earth. What else? There's so many glowing reviews. This is the best thing I've ever fucking seen. Surf nerd shit at its absolute best.
Yeah, but so I can't take credit for... I've worked on so many projects that don't have this response. Like, it's Dave. And I mean, I remember even talking to a photographer friend a long, long time ago, and I was just quizzing him on what makes his photography as good as it is. And he was just like, it's all the subject. You know, someone who's particularly interesting looking and has all that character. Like you press the button in the same way, put them in the same scene, lighting or whatever. Like as soon as the subject changes, then I don't feel any like, oh wow, I'm nailing it. Like it's simply... It's
a lovely, humble shift of the focus of the conversation. I appreciate what you're doing here, but I'm not buying it.
But it's true though. Like it's not like you look at any of my other things and people respond in this way. It's simply like what Dave brings to it. Like it's not like, oh wow, the edit is incredible. You know what I mean?
It is though, and it's thoughtful and it's considered and it's funny. And not many people can do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of jumping off points though. A lot of people, Dave it's so weird just saying your name all the time and you're right there. That guy is really good at bringing like 400 ideas to every situation. Not 400, but more the better, because the more different jumping off points and tangents and different bits of energy that is there, there's so much to work with.
What surprised you about him and working with... You've spent a lot of time in rooms together now over the last few months. What surprised you about that guy?
Well, I feel like I already know you well enough to not...
What do you find other people are surprised by when they watch something like this about Dave? Sorry, I'm making you both squirm. I'm loving it.
Love it.
I think what you were referring to before, or actually probably more specifically what you said, Dave, about quite often you'll show up in the singular area of serious sort of chat, or quite often framed that way with, you know, that sentimental music playing and I don't know if they slow down your voice, but there's this like that spark is there, and the humor and that stuff. I think actually I have something that surprised me, but I think that's what surprises a lot of people is that for some reason hasn't just shown up as much as it should have, like your humor and character. But the thing that I think actually surprised me is that you've got so much to say, but you won't necessarily say it unless it's kind of pried out of you. Like you'll say a sentence, right? And if I was like, cool, that's enough. You're not like, oh, hey, there's all this extra stuff. Keep the camera. Like you're so happy to end talking as quick as possible. And that's quite the anomaly for me, because most people who love talking and are really good at it, you can't shut them up. And it gets to the point where it's annoying. Whereas you've got so much gold, but you have to force it out of you. And funnily enough, if we would have shot 1/10 of the interview footage, you wouldn't have cared. You wouldn't have thought about it twice. And so I think that was something that stuck out. I was like, oh, Dave really doesn't care. And I think it's just because you just don't care about being judged or whatever. So anything that comes out in an interview, whether it's the whole picture or the smaller picture, it's quite refreshing.
Yeah, well, it's a tricky line, and that's something I actually have been really aware of over the years because of the whole soapbox scenario that happens with any of us who feel like we have an expose or a movement we want to start, or something like, environmental activism has this thing. Remember the other day I was saying to you, oh, look, if you do anything where you mention any of the activism things I've done in the past, can you please frame it as experiments in activism? And that's something I've been really cognizant of for years, because I just cringe at the idea of sounding like someone who's speaking from a higher position or a position of authority in any way that is, more than anyone else's. And
I think I would also interject, as someone who has definitive answers.
Yeah.
I see you push back against that a lot.
Yeah, 100%. And so when we're doing things like this project, and I have so much to say about all these branches of the surfing experience, then I'm just trying to dance that line and never come across or even think that I have a position that is more than anyone else's. And that's something like, when we would be filming something, I would quite often flip your question back to you because I want to know what you have to say. And that then becomes like a conversational thing that's really fun, and you go back and forth. And that's just, to me, over the years, that's been such a fun thing to do in our world, where typically the camera's pointing at the surfer, and the surfer is such a specialist to become a well-known surfer that they've pretty much sacrificed everything else in life to become this incredible specialist at riding waves. But often there's not much else going on there with that story. And I've always found that the most interesting people on trips are the filmers and the writers and the photographers, because they just have so many different experiences in their life. And the surfers, we're all these one-dimensional whatevers in front of the camera. So
Speaking of which, Danny, I heard you speak about your impression of Dave as being quite animalistic, being quite animal-like in...
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I want to hear about this.
That's a complete bastardization of what I said. How dare you?
Tell me more.
No, well, we are animals. We often forget.
We are.
We're human animals.
Yes.
But I meant in terms of like a wild animal. So Vaughan asked me, he said like, oh, what have you learnt spending all this time on this project or whatever? And one of the things that has stuck in my head is how often you'll reference the getting out of your head and feeling things in your body, like a more somatic experience. Is that the right word? Does that make sense? Don't know what that word means, but hopefully that I use that correctly. And that's not a new idea for me, but how often you refer to that and how much of a thread that is for you is something that really stuck out to me. It's like, oh, that's kind of his secret. And so that's really got me thinking, which is paradoxical. But that's something that I've really thought about a lot and carried away in just day-to-day life from that. And the way I interpret it, and you can let me know if I'm mirroring what you're meaning, is kind of when you're in your less heady, less analytical, less intellectualizing, and you're just feeling, it's kind of more intuitive, you kind of more tap into your senses. And it's, I guess the thing you always say is getting out of your own way, which is so often easily the mind can do that.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the reason I bring that up a lot, is because within the surfing experience, we're given that opportunity a lot to be riding on a wave, performing a physical function, like being fully capable to interact with the living world, but it's not our intellect that's in the driver's seat in that moment. And then it's interesting to me that those then can become some of the most joyous and rad moments of our life, like that we can recall a 5-second tube ride perhaps from like 20 years ago, 5 seconds of clock time. Like what else in our life can we look back and go, I remember those 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Like that's how
distinctly
potent.
too, yeah.
Yeah, it's a potent experience to me. It's really interesting, and that it's there when our really intellectual mind is not really there is interesting to me. And
I have a wave that I often recall. If I'm trying to fall asleep, I'll go back to this one particular wave. Do you have a surfing experience like that, Danny, that's like your home base?
I have one that, I don't know if it helps put me to sleep, but it's just the first one that comes into my head every time. And it probably might be one of the best waves I've ever caught. And you know what happened as well? It was like a double up, right? And the first one, it came through, and the first one I just butchered. And it was just like, no. And then, which never happens, I swear, like 10 minutes later, the exact same thing came through again. And I was like, you never get a second chance in surfing. Everything's so fleeting. It's like, oh, that one wave that's just like, I swear to God, every drop was identical. And so if I never would have been able to get this if I hadn't butchered I hadn't got two, because the first one I butchered, and it was just being able to learn from that and have that repetition was it. And I always just think about that.
that's so classic.
Yeah.
What is your wave, Lauren?
When I first came to Australia, I was 20, and I was just like slumming around town with my longboard, catching buses and having a backpack full of chips and hummus to sustain myself for days on end. But dropping in on a wave at the pass, the sun is rising, all the water is just perfectly in place, colors, town far away, not many people in the water. It's just like ultimate serene seascape.
So less about the wave than more just about the whole world at that moment.
Yeah, just peaceful, and it sends me right into like relaxation. Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible. Let's raise a glass to something bigger than just great beer. Meet Stone & Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small, right from the heart of Byron Bay. Stone & Wood isn't just about brewing beer, it's about building a community. Certified B Corp and driven by environmental and social responsibility, they're all about making a positive impact one sip at a time. Their philanthropic arm, the Ingrained Foundation, supports local grassroots organizations, channeling funds and volunteer hours straight into the communities they call home, focusing on environmental and social causes close to the heart. Here's to Stone & Wood for crafting exceptional brews and for making a tangible difference in our Northern Rivers community. Patagonia is in business to save our home planet. Founded by Yvonne Chenard in 1973, Patagonia is a surf and outdoor apparel company based in Ventura, California. As a certified B Corp and a founding member of 1% for the Planet, the company is recognized internationally for its product quality and environmental activism, as well as its contributions of nearly $230 million to environmental organizations. Patagonia's unique ownership structure reflects that Earth is its only shareholder. Profits not reinvested back into the business are paid as dividends to protect the planet. Futures makes the first surf fins from recycled fishing nets. Alpha Net Plus is an innovative collaboration between Futures Fins and Borreo, blending carbon and discarded fishing nets. To date, they've transformed more than 35,000 kilos, that's about 77,000 pounds, of discarded fishing nets into new Alpha fins at their headquarters in Huntington Beach, California. Nets that would have otherwise ended up in the ocean. Made for high performance and tested by the best, from our very own Dave Rastovich to friend of the podcast, John Florence, Alpha is available in a wide range of fins for those who want to make a difference with every wave you catch. Learn more at futuresfins.com. The best summer surf seasons go hand in hand with fried eyeballs. Looking perpetually red-eyed might be an indicator of good times, but it also hurts. Good sunnies are a non-negotiable, but ours inevitably get jumbled in the beach bag, and the lenses get shredded by sand. Child, that's C-H-I-L-D-E, Eco Eyewear reimagines the way we use sunglasses. Instead of tossing out frames because of scratched lenses, the Child for Life program offers free lens replacement up to 12 months from purchase and for a small fee thereafter. Child makes sunnies and prescription glasses from plants, not petrol. It's eyewear that's made to last and able to be repaired for a smaller energy footprint. Let's reimagine the culture of disposability together. Learn more at childeyewear.com. So Danny spoke a bit about what he has taken from spending a little time with you. What's your takeaway from the East experience?
I would say that I'm really grateful to have said yes, because, you know, me, I say no to a lot of things over the years because I don't want to assume people want to keep seeing my head and hearing from me.
I hear you say a lot, I've been doing the same turn for 30 years. How do people still want to watch it?
Why is anyone interested in this deal? But anyway, so I'm really stoked to have said yes, because I've just had so many lovely moments with people actually, like out in the world. You know, I don't get my communications through Instagram and stuff like that. So if I see someone at the beach and they're surfing with their kids, and this is lately, they've been like really forthright and coming up and saying how stoked they've been to learn stuff from what you've been making, Danny, and to have a laugh and to show their kids and to just be lit up and then curious about, our footprint with all the stuff we make and use in surfing and how to do better with that. That's in there in a really digestible way. So that's been really nice. Like just to feel like for years I've always wanted that sort of light, we're in this together tone and humour to be a part of these sort of conversations. But it's tricky to convince other groups you're working with to do that. And that's why it's so great that we've been able to do that together, Danny.
And what about in terms of like practical spin-off ideas of things you want to focus your time on moving out of this project into others?
So really, and I know we've spoken about this, Danny, is like the idea of this being a real prod for us to do better with filling landfill with these things we make at the core of the surfing experience, the boards we use, and the whole phenomena of like soft top boards that, you know, are waterlogged and toast within a year, and there's just millions of them around the world now. Every surf school has stacks of them. Every pro who's not on tour has a signature model now, and that their use by date is really quick. So that's one branch that's, I think, a little bit embarrassing when it comes to the waste that we're creating in the surfing world. And then surfboards, specifically ones that we use at like a really intricate level. The idea that this will be a bit of a prod, and I just keep seeing, I don't know why I keep seeing this person, but I just, in my imagination, I keep seeing like some kid up in the redwood forests in Oregon who's growing and eating lots of different mushrooms and partaking of all kinds of mind-expanding stuff, who's going to crack the code on mycelial foam surfboard blanks that we can grow under our house in the dark with some fiber carriers and some spores, and you can essentially grow the surfboards that we use and then put them in your compost veggie garden when you're done. Like the idea that that's our future, to me, is so exciting, and to think that perhaps this project a prod for someone like that, because I just know it's out there, and I just know that exists already. We're seeing it with packaging. All kinds of people are using mycelial foam instead of styrofoam and polyurethane foam. So it's just a no-brainer that we can make those foam packages big enough to be functional surfboards. So that's what I would love to see with all of that.
Danny, can you tell us about your biggest creative fail? Because you've worked in a lot of different mediums.
I've
You've done a
failed a lot.
podcast. No, I have. I really learned, this year has been a real year of rejection for me creatively. And I really have thought a lot about that this year, how much failure is a part of being a creative person. Which everyone is a creative person, but if you're trying to make things in the world or share them with people or try to get funding for things, like you're going to get rejected. Regularly.
Yeah. So you have just had ideas that have been shut down? Because I wouldn't say that's a failure.
Yeah, just projects that you think that you put a lot of time and energy into shaping, and then other people don't feel like they're worth putting time and energy into.
That's tricky.
That they're not valid.
That can be really tricky for sure.
Yeah.
My creative failure, I don't know.
You just forget them?
I think some of the things that stick in my mind about failures are like, you brought up that week wrap show I did, and like, I'd never done that before. And it was me, it was my face on screen, and I was learning in public. And a lot of them were I remember one time
yeah.
I had to my friend was like, oh, you want to be in the background of this commercial? He was shooting a commercial. And I was like, yeah. And I had to be there at 2 a.m. and then record, it was there till the afternoon. And I had to quickly record myself talking and whatever and upload it to the internet. And that was me publicly saying, here I am, just in the worst. It's just, I don't know.
Well, about that time in your life, or maybe just after, I found this writing about you, quote, sufficiently good looking that he can experiment with hairstyles ranging from mullets to horrendous artifacts from the Britpop invasion every 4 to 6 weeks and still, unknowingly, be the smoldering atomic core of hundreds of female crushes.
Oh my God.
Isn't that great?
Wow, you've done some real journalism here and dug up some fake news from the...
Isn't experimenting on yourself, especially at the start of your creative career, just like an imperative part of the stepping stones to subjecting other people to creative experiments?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I think making stuff, sometimes it needs to be public in order to gain a certain amount of necessary reps on the board and going through that loop. But I wouldn't necessarily encourage people to just put stuff out there publicly until they've maybe at least honed it.
Are you saying you wish you would have put out fewer week wraps?
Oh, no. I don't, at the end of the day, I don't really care. It's just more just that failure the next day. It's not like I dwell on it. But in terms of the failures, they're the things that come to mind. Because otherwise the failures when you're up in front and center of things feel less personal. And you can, I don't know, no one's reading the credits anyway. So but yeah, that one just sticks to mind. But no, I don't really regret it. Yeah, you're right. I did learn and it's fine.
Mm. Has there been a hairdo, though, that was specifically a fail? Where Layla's okay, no sex for 6 months, you're out. That's too far.
I'm not, for anyone listening to this, they won't know what I look like and they'll be like, well, he must have wild hairdos. But it's more just a...
It's a vibe.
Just crappy haircuts. And Layla's cut ever since we've been together, she's cut my hair.
Dave cuts my hair. Oh no.
No, that was
going to take that really personally.
Well, you know what happened one time? I was she was away and I was my hair was getting, it probably needs a haircut now. My hair grows really fast for some reason.
So healthy.
Is it healthy? Yes. But anyway, and so I went into this barber character and he was like, oh, mate, I see this all the time. He's like, I think I told him, oh, my girlfriend cut my hair. He asked me, who cut your hair last, implying it was bad. And I was just like, oh, my girlfriend. And he was just like, I see this all the time. It's girlfriends who are trying to give their boyfriends really ugly haircuts so girls won't hit on them. And I was like, whoa.
That's
amazing.
I thought I was looking all right. And I didn't know if I was in the unfuckable category. Yeah, but then I've gone back to her cutting my hair still.
Yeah, but did you hit her up after that and go, hey, are you doing this intentionally to keep those 100 smouldering women that was written about me away?
It was hundreds, plural.
Oh, yeah, sorry, hundreds.
It was plural.
No, it's exactly 100. Oh, yeah. Well, she still cuts my hair, so no, I was...
Okay.
And she cuts my daughter's hair, and we've got the same get-up. So, it's just a family. It's like being in a family band.
Dave's the hair cutter in our
Oh,
family.
you get the scissors out?
Yeah.
Nice.
It's his retirement plan, actually.
I go
Thankfully,
to the
the stab
dogs
gig came
and
through.
do-
Otherwise, he was going to start a barber shop.
Yeah. Sure.
I would hit that up, yeah. You can see if I can have an affair. If you can get me sexy enough, I could be out there having affairs and...
Yeah, I don't think I'm that skilled with that. It's usually, people cringe when they see Minnow's head or the dogs even during summertime. I trim the dogs.
Oh, you can't stop. You're like Edward Scissorhands. Just
Yeah.
anything that'll let you.
And my specialty is speed. I make it really quick and painless for Minnow and for anyone.
Nice.
No, I'd say your specialty is making it look like you didn't have a haircut. That's your selling point. That's the point of difference.
Yeah, that is a skill.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. You
Well,
don't
that's
want that
such a
fresh
skill.
hair.
I couldn't say that myself. It'd be egotistical. I was waiting for you to say that.
Danny, any spin-off projects that have come to mind after working on this, or are you turning away from surfboards and not wanting to focus on surfboards for a few years, or does it make you want to dive deeper into any issues about surfboard construction or surf industry?
No, it's hard to imagine I wasn't aware of the potential of flax and how interesting that could be to dive into. There's probably stuff out there I don't know about, but no, there's nothing that comes to mind in terms of, I'd love to do this or that. I generally just think about the people. Like we were talking about before, it's a difficult thing to find and we're always going to keep doing things. So that's the thing that's always the conversations we're having at Stab. And so.
Who are the storytellers that you look up to in surfing or otherwise?
Goodness. Storytellers. I really like listening to comedians on podcasts. So like you can listen to a stand-up and that's their hour that they've honed.
What do you recommend? Anyone in particular?
Oh man, I feel like it's funny to recommend. It's like music, you know, like it's so personal to people. And I like a lot of really irreverent and offensive people. But I think that in the podcast medium, when they're talking off the cuff and showing that spontaneity is just exceptional. There's a guy called Neil Brennan, who I think is both his stand-up and his podcast are world class, and he's just a brilliant intellect. I find it hard to get through things that don't have a bit of humour. Not always. Like I'll listen to serious things as well, but that's what I probably gravitate towards the most.
Who does humor well in the surf space?
Well, there's only one person that comes
Just
to
you?
mind. No, Tyler Wright. No, I love Tyler. She's not trying to be funny. Sorry, that was sarcasm. The worst type of humour, damn it. Who does it well? I think like Vaughn is someone I just have always. I mean, before I even knew Vaughn and long before I worked for him, I was just blown away at his humour. But he's a really close friend, so that's a biased answer. Other people that come to mind for that, there's a guy called Paul Evans. He's an English writer. I don't know if you guys have ever read his stuff. He sort of pops up a bunch of places, but he does a bunch of articles for us on Stab Premium, and he's just champagne comedy. Like he's coming from a different perspective. And then the other person that more recently I revisited, we did a film with Sterling Spencer. We didn't do it. This guy,
Really
David
good.
Malcolm.
I thought
Do you know
it was
is that his name? I feel like I might be butchering his name. Apologies.
I don't know,
if
but I
am.
watched the film.
Can't remember it off the top of my head. But yeah, it was great. And that film wasn't necessarily a comedy. It tells his life. And of course, Sterling is funny in it. But I don't have Instagram, and I'm not on social media like seeing all the more contemporary stuff. Or I didn't even know he was making things again. But that film forced me to go and just check out that he was out there making stuff again. And I just think his comedic sensibilities, Paul Evans as well, like both those guys, it's not like good for surfing. Like they've got the type of comedic skill that I think is world class. And Sterling he just stands out to me. Have you spent much time with him? Because how close? Yeah. I know you have, Dave, but have you?
Not a lot, just a little bit. But he's a fellow Floridian, so of course I appreciate that about him.
You like his geography? Yeah. He's got great geography.
He's got hot geography.
Do you find him funny? Am I?
Yeah. It's just so refreshing, any humor in the surfing sphere. And I loved when he first started coming out with his creations, where I just find the competitive world just a treasure trove of comedic opportunities. And when he started showing people with funny sound effects, like like struggling when they're doing the Huntington hop and trying to make a wave all the way to the beach to get the score, like it is funny. Like it's just really good that he was doing that. And then all the funny voices over people. I remember one time he put a whale soundtrack over some couple waves of me, and there was no voiceover or anything. It was just I was just like,
I didn't know you were a target.
Yeah, it's just great. It's like, and if you got annoyed by that, if you were one of his like characters in any of that, it would just be even better, you know? And so I liked that. It was just really refreshing, because that was really at a time too, like we were all staying in the Billabong house every winter, and it's the North Shore, and it's like do or die, man. It's like get the wave of the winter. It's so much celebrated narcissism.
Yeah.
And seriousness in it. And it's like, that's your paycheck for the next year if you can do good things there during that time. So it was like this bottleneck period every year where you just got to see the warts and all deal of surfing all meet in this one little strip. And it was just fascinating. And then typically it was quite a chest-beating scene, like macho vibe. But then there's Sterling doing stuff like that. And he's such a quiet, kind of unassuming guy in person too, but really talented in the water and just a breath of fresh air.
Truly, especially in the States, where surfing has been taken especially seriously. And the tone from film and magazines that used to exist are just so earnest. I wanted to ask you about that, Danny. You've been involved in the surf industry for a long time now, been through iterations of magazines that have come and gone or are still going or on different platforms. Surfer Mag in the US is coming back to print. They've run one issue. Where do you think this is going? Like, what's your read on the state of the surf industry and media? Is it going to implode, or will there be a future at all?
I'm not really I have no idea. I'm so inside the stab bubble, and I'm not out there trying to understand it. It doesn't really interest me to understand the shifts and trends of media and brands and that sort of stuff. And so, like, I guess I can only speak from like the stab point of view, which I just think is also, I don't understand. It's insanity. Like there's all this surfing out there for free, and media is becoming this impossible business model, and yet Sam and Tom, but it's like really the driving force of risk taking. And well, they both love taking risks, but like the original impetus was from Sam to like ask people to pay for surfing, and then still continue to grow and maintain a business while he's swimming upstream, two different streams connecting together, and he's swimming upstream of both of those. So like, I mean, that's illogical to me, and yet it's doing really well, and it has an audience, and it's still going. So like, yeah, the whole I don't know, you tell me, what do you think's happening out there?
It's
Lauren, you're the
wise elder here, David.
You
please
take an interest in these things though, and it's like, especially because you're navigating that space, Lauren, with women having a voice in this room that's just been dominated by loud men for so many decades. So like, how do you see it right now?
It's just a fascinating time, and looking at professional surfing and how it's like moving into pools and the Olympics, and it's just like, feels like in many ways the professionalization is getting so much further from the core experience, the heart of why we all love just playing in the ocean. Like, it's all seems like it's escalating in its seriousness, and like the jockism, and some of the like young hipster kids are like taking it so seriously that they're actually acting like jocks now, and it's like
Yes.
all weird. And then there's social media, and for women that's been a really interesting thing because they've been able to market themselves for better or worse, and pull in lots of money because of social media posting, and it just feels very diluted.
Yeah,
in a way.
I agree. It's super fragmented. And that's one of the things when everyone refers to surf history, and how in the 60s it was a counterculture and it was a rejection to societal norms to be a surfer. And I feel like surfers nowadays have got about as much in common as people that drive cars. That doesn't mean anything to be a surfer. And yet there's still this concept of this surfer's identity in a culture that we all share, which I just don't believe is really there. And so
You don't think there's anything?
No. It's like I think it's like driving a car. There's something in common I have with someone over in, I don't know, Egypt right now who's driving a car, but like, it's not that meaningful.
I really hold on to hope that there's something, and I think it's the ocean.
Well, yeah. If you dedicate your life to spending a lot of time in the ocean, you're right. Like, there is that kind of experience. And I guess there's something to relate to and connect. I've just done a full backflip because you made me feel bad. No, but like...
No, I think it's really interesting. And some people feel no sense of responsibility to give back to or perpetuate or be invested in the culture of surfing at all, because they do feel like it's super fragmented and that there's no deeper shared value system there.
Yeah. I guess what I would say is I don't think it's all meaningless and doesn't exist. I just don't think it exists in that broad level.
Yeah.
There's just pockets, and there's surfing can be one thing to this group of people, and that's like a little world. And there's so much intersection and overlapping with all the other little worlds, but there's just so many worlds within surfing. And I think that's, if I tried to try and imagine that someone who's got the opposite experience from me in surfing and doesn't, it needs to conform, and we need to have some sort of shared sense of culture, then I don't know. It just seems too hard. But does it matter? Like, what? I don't know.
For me, I think it matters only when, or not only, but it matters a lot when we're inhabiting the same spaces. So when
true.
we come up shoulder to shoulder, and I know, Lauren, you talked about listening to someone who did a Stab podcast recently who said those words about having no allegiance to the surfing history or timeline and ideas of etiquette in the water and stuff like that. But I actually feel like if we were all surfing on our own and there was enough space on the coastlines of the world for us to just go and have these personal experiences, then it would feel very different. You'd just be like, oh, that's just your personal, intimate experience with the ocean. But because we school up and we have to interact with each other in these dense locations, that's to me where it matters, like the way we treat each other in those spaces. And so that hyper individualistic perspective, which I think it stems from Western culture, really, Australian, American, wherever, that we're all part of those really individualized cultures. That's where all that tension comes, you know, and this idea that all this individualism is sitting on top of this other culture of how surfing and surfers used to be before the West got involved. So before Californians were influenced by Hawaiians were riding waves shoulder to shoulder, many people on a wave all together, all kinds of stuff going on. Sure, there's beefs, there's people that have scraps, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. It wasn't utopia, but there was an element of groupness and togetherness there that is common among all traditional cultures around the world as a way to live well and be well. Kind of like we were talking earlier about how when you have a mental health issue, you'll silo away and fragment and be on your own. And that's a pretty unhealthy space to be in, singular like that.
And it's that singular way of doing things, whether it's monoculturing or the idea of the conventional surfboard, anything that differs from, you know, whatever, a 6-foot white thruster being an alternative, even though they're actually the norm. But we have these ideas of conventionality baked into our culture in really weird ways that we continue to accept, even though they don't reflect reality.
Yeah, you guys win. I've completely changed my perspective.
We're coming at you in stereo here. We've got something for each ear.
I guess like when I first imagined it, I was more just imagining the people's taste and like the type of surfing they like, or the type of boards they like, and the way, whether it's a spiritual practice where they meditate on the sand, or if they go out there and like try and win the NFL Super Bowl with their competitive like I just, there's so many different ways to approach it. And I was just thinking it doesn't so matter, they don't need to match up. This is my defense for if I sounded ignorant before, because what you guys said was really compelling. But yeah, when you start to think about like the fact that we do all need to come together, there needs to be some sort of shared thing. I 100% agree. Yeah, I'd never really thought about that stuff before.
It's an interesting one because we can do both, so often, and fortunately we can here. But if you're in Southern California where it's really hard to get away from each other because there's 25 million people there, then you got to sort that stuff out. I feel like we could learn so much from our friends in California who are dealing with future scenarios for a lot of the planet.
Yes.
In terms of overpopulation and ecological issues, social issues, right? So if they can figure out how to coexist there and be happy and do all that, then we can apply that to places like here in Australia where we've got less people. But you go to somewhere like Snapper up the coast, or even in town here at the Bay where there's 100+ people out, you get to see the tension of individualism and collective stoke. Is everyone having a good time out here? Is everyone safe? Or are you just going to go and just burn everyone because you need to get those 3 waves or 30 waves, whatever it is? Just that is an interesting space to be in.
Yeah.
And if we're only celebrating or only shining a light and talking about the individualism aspect of surfers and surfing through winning and losing in competitions and all of that, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, because anytime we come together, we're just going to be a big group of people who are in it for themselves and just fucking do anything to be the winner. And you guys kind of did an amazing job with highlighting that schism with your End of Camaraderie in Big Wave Surfing TV show that you did recently. Yeah. Where you highlighted that it went from being this thing of we're all in this together and this is a dangerous space to be in. It's dangerous to be in 1-foot waves at the pass. So it doesn't have to be huge waves, but we are all in that together when we're together. And when someone comes along and is just like, nope, I'm in it for me, then there's some tension there. Yeah. So I just think that's a real interesting space, and it's so cool that you all have been doing that. And even with the How Surfers Get Paid stuff, which was the first time I knew that you all were still making things, I thought it stopped. But when people told me that, I was like, this is awesome. I want to watch. And it was so cool because you all lifted a veil that showed how all of these individuals were navigating that weird space of making money from surfing. And I don't know, there was a bit of togetherness in that. At the end, I felt like this is cool. They were all these characters who we've all looked up to as these individual lords and queens who were talking about navigating that space all in their own way. And it's just cool. I think it's really been impressive to see the way you all have been telling those stories that have existed within surfing but perhaps haven't had the attention.
Yeah, Yeah, particularly that one.
Yeah.
It serves everyone, or it serves the surfers if that stuff's out in the open. But unlike a lot of other sports, it's all been really quite secretive.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I've got a controversial question here. I've seen a lot of comment about trying to get Dave to do the other surfboard series that you all run, Stab in the Dark, where you'd be riding, quote, conventional surfboards. Is there a chance?
Did the audio come up when we were riding the last boards where when I came in from riding the 3-fin surfboard, Otto said, "Hey, Dave, how was that tri-fin? Did you get that?"
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's the perfect word,
Yes.
tri-fin. You
Yeah.
have to try so fucking hard to ride these things. That's my response. If they want to get me riding 10 3-fin surfboards, I'm going to have to go to the fancy gym in town and wear tight clothing and get really, really strong to ride those boards. So that's my take on it. What would be your take on that?
Oh, I would love to see you do it. I mean, previously, it's been the opposite. So with electric acid, it's been people, Dane, Steph, Noah, who else? Sean, Matt, like people who don't veer from, to high performance outlines or very often, and then put them in the experimental. And that was meant to be the bit of tension. And you're the first one to break that mold. And so we've never done that with Stab in the Dark. Someone who, the very first moment, which it's going to be in that last episode, the very first thing you said on camera is out the front of the picture house before you saw all the boards. You didn't know what you're in for. I was like, what are you thinking right now? And he's like, I bet you guys have stitched me up with 10 thrusters or whatever. Like you were kind of like, you thought.
I thought that for sure. I thought there'd be at least 3.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, we would love you to do it. Is this the official ask? Should I ask on air? Dave, will you do Stab in the Dark?
Oh, God. We'll have to have some more conversations about that. As long as I get sponsored by one of those energy drinks that seem to fund everything in the surfing world now, so I have enough energy to surf those boards.
We could get you some meth. I mean, the German army almost beat the whole world in World War I or II when they first invented it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, imagine what you could achieve with...
surfing.
Yeah, you could be surfing through all day, all night.
Oh, Lauren, I would be such a great partner and friend, wouldn't I?
This series was a challenge enough.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm just kidding. It was so great to see you. You guys just chose the perfect person for the series because I've never met anyone more enthusiastic about nerding out about surfboards all day, every day, for months at a time. Like you were just sunburnt and red-eyed and cooked, and you were barely getting to school pickup for minnow, and you were just so happy and sleeping well at night. And I didn't see you much, but I was happy for you.
Yeah, and it feels infinite too. It feels like we could have kept filming and Dave just would have had more insights around boards and that no one had ever heard. And it's hard to put a cap on it, but
that would be betraying his deep-seated approach to his surfing career, which is
not assuming that people always want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And that's almost like I had a dad who was an incessant
That's
talker.
the political answer. That's not what I was going to say.
Oh, let's hear Lauren's interpretation.
My interpretation is work as little as you can, as much as possible.
Yes, pretty much.
Oh, that's so good.
It might sound weird and opposite to how it's perceived, but surfing to me is really intimate. Mm-hmm. It's really personal, and I just don't like heaping many things on top of it. Like I'm a shit person if I'm not in the ocean and surfing. I would say, but I don't know because I've known that for so long that I just will go down and swim if I'm injured to stay happy and stay good.
I can back you up on that.
Yeah, we both are. We're
how
both
is it for
shit.
you, Danny?
In terms of that side of things?
Well, are you managing to get in the water in between editing sessions? Does it make any difference for you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, being too much time on a computer screen is a recipe for disaster. So I'm definitely happy to have this intense period and then get back to surfing. And it's the ultimate sedative. Like how slow you'll drive back from the beach sometimes. Is so funny because I feel like we're all capable of road rage. I feel like the Dalai Lama is capable of road rage. It's just there's something, but like you can really see your temperament after a surf. It's particularly a good one, but any surf and how slow you'll drive back from the beach.
Surf stoned.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, it's the best. It's got everything. You're moving. You're in the ocean. You're having fun. You're in the sun. You're dropping in on people and yelling at them. No.
Yeah.
Such a joy.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Is like, and I know you go to great efforts. I'm sure you do too, Lauren, to avoid crowds. That can be the only tricky thing is sometimes when you don't get to get a couple of waves when it's super crowded.
That's why you live in Mullumbimby.
Yeah, where there's no waves at all.
But there's a great river. I wanted to ask you, was it a bit of a risk to take this sort of enviro flax alternative material approach with the East series this time around? Did it feel like it could be a stretch for your core audience there?
No, I don't think so.
How was it landed?
Well, it's talking about the environment and the problem of the environment is a difficult thing to energize anyone around because it's just such a huge problem. It's so funny that it's so hard to get attention because it has all the hallmarks of doom and gloom and whatever. But for some reason, so it would have been if it was broad, but the fact that it was so specific, and Dave and Gary have been working on these boards for 8 years, and there's a real story. And funnily enough, because Dave's hiding away, no one's really told this story. Like, it's amazing, and you need time for any environmental project to be validated because you can't start talking about it in a year because the whole point is that it lasts long. So it was just a freakish circumstance in that.
The Surfers for Climate crew actually were investigating the flax storyline kind of at the same time. Like it was a double pop-up at the same time.
It was,
thing. And so they've launched at the same time. So it feels like there's, I don't know, there's
well, they were ahead of
cultural
us.
intrigue.
They had finished theirs, but they were lovely in helping us out, and also letting the releases coincide, which we were grateful for. So they've been awesome. But they were on it and had documented it already. So we were kind of second, but they were really helpful in letting us do it with them. Yeah, I feel like it's regardless of the environment. It's a fascinating. People are obsessed with surfboards. It blows my mind. How many people? I don't know. Do you mean like how many people have seen it?
Sure. And it's just interesting.
Yeah. I don't know how many people have seen. I don't really pay attention to the analytics, but
good for you.
or what I know is people just care about surfboards in an immense way. And that's a little bit foreign to me because I don't love surfboards in that same way. I mean, I kind of do more so now, I think, working on this project because you've given me like a point of view, whereas previously I was a little bit turned off.
Ooh, what changed for you?
Well, so originally I think I had a friend who didn't surf very well, and I think he compensated by being obsessed with surfboards and having a million of them and talking about them. And I was kind of just a bit like, I could put my fins in backwards and wouldn't even notice. Like, I don't need to be like this surfboard guru. But like, I think like having Dave's ability to explain just basic ideas around the board that are less, maybe just a more creative way of voicing them than say Shaper would, because they're maybe a bit too granular. And then even just the chat with Vince, I didn't even understand a lot of the details until I was editing. I was like, oh, this is actually fascinating. But yeah, I think it's just been just a different approach, like whereas it's a bit more fun versus, I don't know, I was just a bit deterred by board fandom for some reason. But yeah, people love boards. And so, to come back to what I was saying, like I think the interest in a new material, whether it's good for the environment or not, it would have worked. But from a storytelling point of view, it's like all the bases are loaded, you know. The Earth's on fire. What we do is particularly bad for the environment. And here's something that can solve the biggest problem. Like storytelling is just problems that are being solved or whatever. It's like, or at least, you know, try and tackle that challenge. So no, I think it was perfect.
Are you getting the sense that people will be experimenting with flax moving forward? Does it feel like that's been a successful element of this project?
Oh, completely. Yeah. And I'm super biased, and people might be feeding me what they either think I want to hear or I don't know. But like even just every shaper that I've chatted to, like, when's this coming out? Can I talk about the winner?
Yeah, it'll come out just after.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Ryan Lovelace, he's ordered a huge roll of flax, and then every shaper that I've chatted to is going to start experimenting with it more. Maybe not every single one, but outside of that, just the buzz, and even shapers that weren't invited. I've heard a bunch of stories about them playing with flax. So like, I think the goal of awareness is 100% achieved, but then the actual slow movement to change in the industries could happen.
Thanks for listening with us today. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented, absolute legend, Ben Jake Alexander. The soundtrack was composed by Shannon Soul Carroll, with additional tunes by Dave and Ben. We have a few new Water People experiments this season. You can find every episode of the podcast on our Water People YouTube page, or subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter to get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, and behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast and more via our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast.